In this video, I'm going to show you how new science is being shown that high carb diets is getting stronger than ever for fat loss amongst men, and how there's hundreds of men eating more carbohydrates and losing more body fat utilizing carbohydrate metabolism. So this is going to be in a complete data case study on carbohydrate metabolism, a metabolic comprehensive study that I want to actually show you the science behind one, carbohydrate metabolism, what carbohydrate metabolism really is, why a lot of guys get stuck in fat loss plateaus and metabolic gridlock and not able to break past certain fat loss plateaus. And then we're going to go into a little bit about how actual carbohydrate metabolism can improve A1C levels, improve cholesterol levels, and a lot of health benefits as well. We're also going to go through a little bit of how your metabolism works and how carbohydrates correlate to your metabolism, how different macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats correlate to your metabolism. And then we're going to go through a little bit about your digestion, how your digestion correlates to your metabolism as well. And then at the very end of the video, I want to make sure that you do stick around because I'm going to show you step by step what this looks like in an active case study with my client Dan, who's eating 1,100 more calories per day right here. 1,100 calories per day. Digestion is beautiful. Eating more food, more carbohydrates, but we optimize the body for a carbohydrate metabolism state. So if you guys don't know me by now, my name's Adam Bono. I'm an online metabolic specialist, and I specialize in metabolic health, metabolic priming, and the process of utilizing metabolism to our advantage to see predictable fat loss using actual science. So let's get right into the video because we got a lot to cover, and I want to make sure that you guys do stick around to the very end because I'm going to try to help each and every single one of you out as much as humanly possible because, you know, there's a lot of guys out there that have been doing low carb for a very long time, and these are all a lot of the clients that came to us have been on low carb. And each and every single one of these clients, I want you to remember this, each and every single one of these clients are eating more carbs per day, eating more carbs. And it's going to make a lot more sense when we start to understand carbohydrate metabolism in full and what carbohydrate metabolism really is. So what carbohydrate metabolism really is basically an energy pathway, right? So when you optimize the body for carbohydrates, you optimize the body for a carbohydrate metabolism state. When you optimize the body for a low-carb ketosis state, you optimize the body for a fat adaptative state. So the difference between the two is that fat adaptation is achieved through low-carbohydrate fat diets, shifts the body's primary fuel source from carbohydrates to fats. Carbohydrate metabolism, on the other hand, involves the body's use of carbohydrates for fuel and energy, primarily through glucose, and it's the default fuel source for most people. So carbohydrate metabolism is primarily fuel source of carbohydrates. Excess glucose is stored in the liver. Metabolic processes, the body breaks down carbohydrates into glucose, which is then used by the cell for energy through the process called glycolysis. So carbohydrate metabolism provides the body with energy, primarily form of glucose, which is essential for various bodily functions and physical activity, and also allows for the storage of excess glucose as glycogen for later use. So here's a more detailed explanation of carbohydrate metabolism, and we're going to link this to how your metabolism works when I pull up the actual picture. But the energy source is like their primary source. Your body prefers carbohydrates. Let's think about this logically because carbohydrates are ready available. They can be burned very quickly, and they're not as slow digesting, and so your body can utilize them much quicker. And so where it really comes in a very large concept and where I see a lot of issues is that carbohydrates are for performance, right? Your performance athletes, your weight trainers, your physical trainers, your bike riders. We have a lot of guys who come to us who are long bike riders, and they utilize a low carb diet and they run into a lot of cortisol and inflammation. So carbohydrates gives us that ready available energy to perform, right? For a high performance rate. But also carbohydrates are good for brain function, muscle function, glycogen, gluconeogenesis, ATP production, insulin and blood sugar. So carbohydrate intake can trigger the release of insulin, which helps regulate blood sugar by facilitating glucose uptake in the cells. And then metabolic processes. Carbohydrate metabolism is involved in various metabolic processes, including the synthesis of other important molecules like lipid and proteins. So what this means right here is that carbohydrates and proteins have a synergistic effect. You can think of carbohydrates as a transportation mechanism for protein, right? And so like with protein, for instance, is that when you add carbohydrates in with protein, it allows the carbohydrates to push the protein into the correct areas, therefore signaling cell response and muscle regrowth and myofilament, adaptation and multiplication. So fiber benefits and type 2 diabetes. So understanding carbohydrate metabolism is important for managing conditions like type 2 diabetes, where the body either doesn't produce enough insulin or can't effectively use it, leading to problems with glucose regulation. So exercise can improve carbohydrate metabolism by increasing insulin sensitivity. So like, let's take our client Mike right here. He came to us at 1,900 calories with an A1C at 11, right? So we got him to 2,900 calories, just eating more carbs, and down to a 7.6 A1C. So here's the reason why that this is a very big aspect when it comes to the overall health aspect, is that like when you don't optimize the body for a primary fuel source and you eat both high carbs and high fats, you run into metabolic gridlock, right? Which the body is confused on which energy pathway it should primarily focus on. So it becomes inefficient at switching between the two energy pathways, carbohydrates and fats. So healthy metabolism involves the ability to switch efficiently between glucose and fat for energy based upon the body's needs. So like at a fasted state of cardio, you can utilize more of a fasted state and target the body's response to a fat adapted state, which therefore triggers the response of triglyceride release and then fat mobilization and oxidation. So metabolic gridlock is when the switching ability is impaired, leads to a gridlock where the mitochondria struggles to process incoming fuel, resulting in buildup of metabolic indices and decline of overall metabolic function. So consequences is this impaired metabolic function contribute to weight gain, insulin resistance, fatigue, and increased risk of developing chronic disease like type 2 diabetes. So it's like these issues that are coming up isn't because of carbohydrates, it's because of the calories combined that somebody would be eating, right? The overconsumption of overall food. And the body doesn't know which energy pathway to actually optimize for. So there's a saying in the term of the nutrition space that says fat burns in a carbohydrate flame. So the body uses energy for fat. It often relies on carbohydrates for a certain process. For example, the body may need carbohydrates to initiate the process of breaking down fat for energy. So glycolysis and fat production. This process of breaking down glucose for energy, if glucose is not immediately needed for energy, can be stored. We know that. Like we don't want to overeat on carbohydrates because a lot of guys when they watch my channel, they'll go out and try to transition their body into carbohydrate metabolism state, and I'm going to show you how. But like they'll do it wrong. Is because you have to understand that like the body does take a certain transitionary period, and if you don't transition properly or you get the correct protein, carbs, and fats, like the macronutrient breakdown, your body will have a bad response to carbohydrates, which leads to weight gain, brain fog, and just other intermediary, processes that just are very uncomfortable, right? I think that some guys even say like digestive issues, but like what that is like you not transitioning the body correctly. We got to understand how to transition the body correctly to utilize carbohydrate metabolism. It's a very slow process, but when you understand what key factors to look for, you can successfully do so. So the regulation of glycolysis, right? So now that we know all of this about blood sugar, insulin, metabolic processes, carbohydrate metabolism, I want to first of all take a look at how the protein and macronutrient breakdown really the science behind the actual breakdown between certain macromolecules. So, for instance, metabolism, is correlated to muscle tissue. The more muscle tissue you have, the higher metabolism, and that's correlated to the BMR. So 4 calories per gram, carbohydrates, for instance, body's main fuel source, is correlated to leptin, which is the satiety hormone. That's why when you eat very low carb, you get the cravings for sugar and you get the cravings for carbs, and then you eat some carbs and you just can't handle yourself and you overeat the carbohydrates because you're craving it so bad. But so they support bodily functions as well. So carbohydrates and proteins support bodily functions. So body's main fuel source gets broken down to glucose for energy, extra stored in liver. So let's take fat, for example, and why the ketosis diet is primarily, one, poor for digestion, and two, it's not optimized for a higher level energy pathway, right? Because one, fat has a 3% thermic effect and a 9 calorie per gram. So which one do you think out of the two, and we'll get into the thermic effect of food here in a second, which one of the two of these carbohydrates or fats would you think the body would primarily want to focus on, want to burn? It's going to want to burn the one that has 4 calories per gram and a larger thermic effect because it's going to be easier to digest. And we're going to get into digestion here in a second, but digestion is a very key, important regulatory factor in metabolism. Because let's think about this. It's what is the concept of your metabolism? How your body utilizes energy from broken down food. What is digestion? How your body digests the food. So the first process in metabolism is understanding digestion. So let's take the clients here, for example, that were at pretty low carb for an extended period of time, like Dan or like my client Kevin right here. You can just see that digestion is just not where it needs to be. The digestion is almost like bloated, kind of a little bit of cortisol. This is a client that came to us on Ozempic, which at 800 calories. This is a client that came to us well overweight, struggling to successfully lose weight just because overall metabolic pathways and insulin resistance didn't allow his body to actually process glucose correctly. So we had to transition him out of a very low glucose state. And like a bunch of other clients, but you can just tell based upon like their body compositions. This is my client Devin. He was at 1,600 calories and 50 grams of carbohydrates on the left. He's at 350 grams of carbs on the right. But you can kind of see like the inflammation that kind of arises, right? Obviously, yes, a little bit of muscle tissue does play in the concept because the more muscle tissue that you have, the higher your metabolism is, which is something that we will focus on. But when we break down your metabolism full, is that we remember how carbohydrates and protein are like support of essential body functions because muscle tissue does support essential body functions and it's part of your BMR. Well, that's 60% of your entire metabolism, right? You can correlate carbohydrates and protein to your entire metabolism. But when it comes to thermic effect of food, energy breakdown, breakdown food, digestion, calorie conversion, when we look at the thermic effect of each macromolecule, is that 35% thermic effect from protein. Very high. There's done studies that show that over-the-counter fat burners work similarly to a higher protein thermic effect. I mean, our clients utilize typically a 1 to 1.2 times their body weight in protein, and that's in pounds. We get a very large thermic effect for their food intake. And then carbohydrate intake, this is where I want you guys to focus. So let's think about this concept just effectively, right? Let's think about carbohydrate metabolism and fat adaptation and which one the body would primarily want to use. You think the body would primarily want to use a macromolecule that has a 10% thermic effect, which means that it digests relatively pretty quick, or a very slow digestion macronutrient, right? Or like fats, like with 3% thermic effect. So it's like carbohydrates already have a 3 times as much thermic effect of food when it comes to the whole metabolic pie chart. And then you got your non-energy activity thermogenesis, like walking, which does improve digestion. But like this is where a lot of guys will focus and they'll run into cortisol related issues. So like breaking down digestion, how this all correlates with digestion is that like carbohydrates influence digestion by providing fuel for the process and impacting how quickly other foods are digested. They're broken down to glucose. So carbohydrates are the body's main fuel source. We know that. And during digestion, they are broken into glucose, which is used as cell by various energies. So like the reduction of inflammation and cortisol is a huge benefit to overall carbohydrates. Inflammation from cortisol and bodily fatigue is the number one factor that leads to like the cortisol gut that you see, like the gut that you just feel looks inflamed, you can't get it to go away. Well, that's one because of digestion, because fat slowly digests at a very slow rate because it's a 9 calorie per gram. But also it's because we're not optimizing the body for a certain fuel source. So support essential body functions, we know that. But like how carbs play a crucial role in digestion. Carbs are broken down into glucose, which provides energy for the digestive system, promote regularity, feed gut microbiomes, slow down digestion with simple complex carbs, which, to be honest with you guys, is that we actually utilize just high glycemic carbohydrates in our program. White rice, cream rice, fruit, rice cakes, because we want to get the most out of carbohydrate metabolism. And I know a lot of guys are thinking is like, well, isn't that going to like raise insulin sensitivity? Well, when you optimize the body for carbohydrate metabolism, no, not at all, because we're lowering A1C eating more food. We're lowering blood sugar levels eating more food. We're improving insulin sensitivity eating more carbohydrates. And so your body becomes a lot more accustomed to it. So obviously we can't do this all at once, just throw a bunch of carbohydrates on somebody and then like expect their body to transition. There's a certain transitionary process that I'm going to show you here in a second that it takes to get to your body to that point. So benefits of carbs for digestion: reduce risk of constipation, improve bowel regularity, enhance gut health, lower blood sugar fluctuations, increase satiety, and reduce calorie intake. It's important to consume varied carbohydrates. We know that. So another one is like the big one is the cortisol, right? So according to research from randomized control trials, carbohydrates can potentially reduce stress by influencing the body's cortisol levels, with studies showing that increasing carbohydrate intake can lead to a decrease in salivary cortisol. Cortisol reduction, in the mechanism of the body, the potential mechanism behind the stress-reducing effect is thought to be related to the role of carbohydrates in serotonin production, a neurotransmitter associated with feelings of well-being and calmness. So it's called parasympathetic state. And when your body gets put into a parasympathetic state, it gets put into a state of feelings of well-being, calmness, and serotonin production, right? And so it's carbohydrates are the trigger to the neurotransmitter that actually improves sleep, improves digestion, improves overall cortisol as well. Because like put the body in a state of healing, it's going to heal itself in a lot of different ways. But low carbohydrates and cortisol, low carbohydrate diets, especially those very low in carbohydrates, like ketogenic diets, can trigger the stress response, potentially leading to increased cortisol levels. This is because the body may need to produce more cortisol to generate glucose alternative sources when the carbohydrate intake isn't limited. So it leads to insulin resistance, chronic stress, elevated cortisol can impair insulin sensitivity, leading to higher blood sugar levels, increased fat storage. So obviously, like that's where the low carb diets do come from. When you get very low in carbohydrates, we get insulin sensitive. Body gets very high levels of cortisol, and then you get the blood sugar, levels that you do when it comes to a health concern. But fat storage, cortisol can influence where fat is stored, potentially favoring abdominal fat. Cortisol has an anti-inflammatory property, but prolonged elevation can lead to inflammation, which can negatively impact metabolism, potentially contribute to weight gain, right? So the whole concept of what we're really teaching here, and we can read through this as well, the whole concept of what we're really teaching here is that like carbohydrates are the main mechanism of improving digestion through neurotransmitters like serotonin, cortisol decrease, and when cortisol levels are high, maybe you have like a high stress job, you're on your feet a lot, maybe you manage a bunch of teams, and you're just stressed psychologically all the time, we can run into that cortisol wall, which starts to put that like almost gut lack of inflammation and lack of digestion onto your body, and you get kind of like the manager's gut where you just like kind of look bloated and a little bit gross. But cortisol and high levels of stress may cause digestive issues. This is due to the intestinal permeability that weakens the digestive walls and leads to the bloating feeling. This can happen due to a couple of different reasons. High levels of body inflammation due to overworking or undereating. And this is a big one too. I want to put this into context, is undereating is such a huge one. And that's why we have our clients get up in calories and we push their body to digest more carbohydrates and, utilize their metabolism to our advantage to do the heavy lifting, is because if we start to undereat, that's when you run into cortisol like related issues. Psychological stress at home, but this is the importance of sleep and recovery as well as following the macronutrients that we give you as they are designed to lower stress levels, with carbohydrates being the main factor, right? And I pulled this actually right from a client group call that we did, because we give our clients specific macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats, not percentage-wise. And that's like the biggest factor when it comes to transitioning the body to a carbohydrate metabolism state, is understanding that it's very in particular to each person. We change our clients' macronutrients once a week, right? Based upon the progress they make. So like no one client, we work with almost 250 clients right now, and no one client has the same amount of macronutrients, right? Because their body's not in the same spot, their metabolism's not in the same spot, they're not the same height, they're not the same age, they're not the same weight, and all those factors do matter, especially like when cortisol and carbohydrate increase when it comes to carbohydrate metabolism and transitioning the body properly. So carbohydrates increase serotonin, and then carbohydrates can increase serotonin in the brain, impacting mood, sleep, and appetite, right? So how do we put this on a working concept, right? So let's take my client Dan, for example. We're going to run through exactly his transformation, and then I'm going to show you a higher level aspect of how it really works with the model above, and raising the carbohydrate, raising the food, and raising the BMR as well. But like he came to us at 1860 calories, and the macronutrient breakdown is solid. Like honestly, his protein goal is solid, his fat goal is solid, but this is just low, right? He's 58 years old, guys. 58 years old, and he made this type of transformation. So I don't want to ever hear anybody on the internet say like you're too old to get back in shape, or your metabolism is slowed down. It's not true. It's like your metabolism doesn't slow down after a certain age. What has happened over time is people have gotten less active and started eating more and put themselves in a spot where they're gaining metabolic gridlock and not optimizing the body correctly. When you have a GPS system on how to follow this and how to transition the body properly, it's honestly just following like a roadmap. We've done it over 400 times. And at this point, it's just a roadmap based upon data in these check-ins that our clients go through. So you can kind of see when he started at. And we just added 25 grams of carbohydrates right here. Just 25 grams. And look already within the first week what happened. Just 25 grams of carbohydrates. The side shot starts to lean out. And this is what we did each week as he checked in. We checked in for his body composition, his weight, his fatigue, his energy levels, his hunger, his sleep patterns, and we make decisions based upon that, right? So, like for instance, if he's gaining strength, he's getting stronger in the gym, and that's what he collects the data that he sends back to us. We're like, okay, well then our weight might be up if we're gaining muscle tissue, but we're also putting ourselves in a better spot metabolically, so that's fine. If he checks in and energy levels are low, but hunger is high, then we give a carbohydrate refeed because that's a good dictator that cortisol is being put in play. If hunger is high and energy is high, then that's great news because hunger is a key dictator in how well your body's digesting and how fast your body's digesting food, as well as metabolic processes being aligned to increase metabolism. Hunger is a big regulatory factor in understanding the concept of hunger. It's like, yes, we don't want starving hunger, but like hunger is not a bad hormone. Hunger is a key role in like realizing how well our body's digesting, processing food. So we make decisions based upon that. And some weeks we don't change anything. Some weeks we wait 2 weeks, but like you can just see like in his side shots, just week after week. And let me pull these up a little bit closer and see if we can get these side shots a little bit more aligned. You can see like as we pull these up, like 25 more grams of carbohydrates each week based upon this progress he's making. And you can see how well his body's transitioning each week. And then this is where we got him. He got to 2,900 calories, right? 2,900 calories. And this is what he looks like at 2,900 calories. Keep in mind, right here, he was at 1,800 calories, right? So 1,100 calories more per day. So now that you know kind of like the concept of what we do each week, I want you to actually look at this at a scale, knowing what we do each week and the changes that we make. And you can see as you raise food, he just significantly gets leaner each week. And like, guys, this is like an 8-week transformation. Like, this is not a very long transformation at all. Because like I said, when you have the GPS, when you have the roadmap, it's pretty damn simple to follow. Like, we've done it so many times. It's just we understand what data to look for and what data to implement. And that's when you get transformations like this, eating 1,100 calories a day, 58 years old. So I want you to understand this as like a higher level concept of the goal we're trying to achieve with my client Dan right here. So like, first of all, this is like the metabolic priming phase, and that's what we call it when we're raising the food. But here's how it works. So like, yes, he started at 1,800 calories, and we can already assume that his BMR is pretty shot, right? Just because, one, his body composition, his cortisol levels, he was already at 1,800. Like, there's only one way we can go. Like, we can't, like, with his current body composition and the stress levels that are applying on his body, we can't go lower, like, because we're just already too low anyways. We've already hit a metabolic purgatory where we've downregulated the metabolism, we've downregulated the BMR to the point we've put it into like almost a starvation mode, like a survival mode, right? And where survival mode comes from is like, think about like prehistoric times when you go days without eating, where your body is going to, automatically downregulate your metabolism in the concept of thinking it's not going to get food anytime soon. That's what happens. You get under that 2,000 calorie mark, get highly inflamed, lots of cortisol, and you can't break through that fat loss plateau because you've bottomed out your metabolism. So what you have to do is you have to re-optimize it, and you have to reboost it in a sense, right? So how we do that properly is each week as we check in, we make those decisions. And what we're really trying to do right here is we're trying to raise the calories as we raise the BMR, right? So as the calories go up, he's checking in, and keep in context, guys, he's 10 pounds down, right? And as he's checking in, we're slowly raising this up as we're raising the BMR, right? And we know this. We know we're raising the BMR because his body composition, 2, his energy levels, 3, his sleep, and 4, he's losing weight, eating more food. So yes, we're optimizing the BMR because as we know, looking at the metabolic blueprint, is that like exercise isn't the most important factor and the biggest needle mover when it comes to your metabolism. What is the thermic effect of food, your BMR, and your non-adaptive thermogenesis, right? So it's like a lot of guys is like, well, how is he eating more if he's not in a calorie deficit? Well, technically, he is in a calorie deficit because his BMR is doing the heavy lifting. We're putting his BMR in a spot where it's now burning more calories for him at rest. which is a lot more simple than trying to go out and overdo cardio for minimal return. And that's the reason why our clients make such good progress, because we understand the metabolism at a very high level. And so like when we're raising calories, the other thing we are optimizing for is muscle tissue, right? Because obviously we put strength training in play for our clients up 3 to up to 5 days per week. And as they're getting more food, we're also training, right? We're training at a very high level. We're giving them customized workout programs. We're giving them programs for the road. We're making sure that we're covering our bases within our strength training, right? Because we're trying to increase muscle tissue. Because we talked about, remember, that BMR, your muscle tissue is correlated to your basal metabolic rate. So the more muscle tissue that you have, the more food that you can eat, the leaner that you can get, and the higher your metabolism really is. And so we can optimize for that. But not only that, it's like we want to understand the concept of weight loss versus fat loss. So yes, like Dan did lose weight and he lost 10 pounds eating 1,100 more calories. But we want to optimize for muscle tissue because it allows us to have a leaner physique for longer. More muscle tissue means less health concerns, less biomarkers or like health panels within cholesterol, blood sugar, everything, all those stuff. More muscle tissue you have, the healthier that you are as a male. It takes 2 calories to sustain 1 pound of body fat. It takes 8 calories to sustain 1 pound of muscle tissue. So the more muscle tissue you have, the healthier you are, the higher your metabolism is, and the leaner that you look as well. Because the more muscle tissue you have at the same body fat percentage, the body fat has an even displacement, right? So let's think about what skinny fat is, for instance. Skinny fat is the lack of muscle tissue and the lack of fat loss. In a lot of cases, when guys come to us in the quote-unquote skinny fat phase, all we have to do is grow them into their skin and they lean out very quickly. Because one, it's the percentage-wise of muscle tissue to fat, not that you need to lose more fat. You just need more muscle tissue so you appear and look leaner. Like bodybuilders in their off-season, for example, they have visible six-pack abs because they have the mature muscle tissue that is aligned. So obviously, yeah, when we go into his study right here, you can see we actually started his cut. We did start his cut, but he hasn't been doing any cardio. He's just been doing steps. But now we've optimized the BMR. So we have the BMR working on our hands now. So what do we do next and after this metabolic priming phase? We go back in, and what we'll do is we'll do a cutting phase, right? So this will be cutting phase 1 for Dan. So when we go into the cutting phase, the same logic does apply, but now what we do is we focus on a little bit more exercise activity so we can push the needle a little bit further. So he's not there yet. He's currently in our program right now. Great dude. He's an Army Ranger, and he's overseas right now in Amsterdam. Such a good dude. But he's still in a cutting phase, right? And so what we're doing is each week as he checks in, now we're doing the same data analysis and correlated study, but we're switching the food down and we're raising the cardio up. Right? And obviously over time, the BMR will start to lower, but that's why we check in with our clients each week to monitor their cortisol levels. Because if cortisol levels start to go up a little bit, we can see it in their body composition. We can see that in their weight. We can see that in their energy, their sleep, their hunger. And we'll do a correlated carbohydrate refeed, which will revamp and boost thyroid hormones, right? And when you understand thyroid hormones and how they work, the amount of carbohydrates in your diet is directly linked to your levels of the active T3 hormone, which is your thyroid hormone, right? And so lower T3 levels can lead to a drop in active T3, right? Which is important to understand. In order to function properly, maintain an appropriate metabolism, our body produces an important hormone called T3. It's the most active thyroid hormone and completely important for blood glucose management and proper metabolic function. So it's like, as we're like raising these carbohydrates, we're also improving T3 levels. But as we're lowering the carbohydrates, we want to monitor BMR and cortisol. So if we need to give a structured carbohydrate refeed, we can. In a lot of cases, clients will hit like a fat loss plateau. We'll give 100 gram carbohydrate refeed, and they'll drop 5 pounds in one day because we're eliminating all of the cortisol on the body. And when the body eliminates the cortisol, it understands how to process and burn fat effectively. And so it's the same thing. We go down, and we go up, and a little bit more cardio. And so the reason why we start cardio at 0 is because we want all of this cardio to work with, right? If we start cardio at 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and we start a cutting phase, this is how much we have left. We only have to go up because due to metabolic adaptations, your body will accustom and adapt to cardio. Metabolic adaptation, your cardiovascular system improves. It gets easier to do, and so we want to keep that as low as possible and put most of the heavy lifting on the metabolic priming phase on your BMR, right? So, anyways, Like I said, I wanted to give a full comprehensive study on carbohydrate metabolism, how it correlates to your digestion, how it correlates to fat loss, and how we are currently utilizing this approach with our current clients on the online right now to allow them to eat more food and lose more body fat. The research is very clear, and when you start to understand the research, it does start to make more sense. But more importantly, the results, they speak for themselves. It's like we've worked with 400 plus men implementing this strategy with a 99% client success rate. On the platform Trainerize, we were top 4 out of 400,000 different online training programs on the internet with our sustainable approach to fat loss, right? We have guys in their 40s and 50s, and typically we do work with guys from 40 to 65 years old. But we have guys that are 45 years old looking like this, like 58 years old looking like this, and 46-year-olds, like it's incredible, right? I mean, it does speak to the type of men that we do work with. I mean, these guys are go-getters. These guys don't settle for average, and that's the type of men we like to work with because, the program we run is an elite program for elite level individuals in the space who want to get in the best physique of their life. So if that does sound like you and you have been struggling with a low carbohydrate, you don't understand metabolic pathways and you want to optimize your metabolism for the betterment of your future, for the betterment of your health, or you just simply want to reach a next level physique unlike anything you've ever achieved before, there'll be a link in the description. There'll be a small video for you to look through and see more about the program that we do run. But I will say is that we do have a 99% client success rate, and every client who's ever gone through our program, there's not a moment in time they didn't look back and say, damn, I'm glad that I did that. Because once you understand how it works, that's where sustainability comes from. Once you understand your metabolism and you comprehend how your body's functioning, it takes a really big weight off your shoulders, right? It's very, very liberating to understand how your body works metabolically and how your energy pathways do work and the correct approach to sustainability. Because sustainability comes from education, and that's what we provide with our clients. Like selfishly, we tell our clients our goal for you is to not come back, because we want to give you the type of education you can teach your children, you can teach your wives, and then you can sustain. Like, we want to shake our clients' hands at the end and know with absolute clarity that they can keep this off the rest of their life, they can maintain it for the rest of their life, and they have the education to keep it for the rest of their life. So if that sounds like you, and you've been spinning your wheels, and you're just goddamn frustrated, I get it. I've been there before myself. I've been the guy who's extremely out of shape. I've been the guy who is extremely overweight. And I understand how uncomfortable it can be to take your shirt off at the pool, how, you want to hold your hands over your abdomen and so people don't see you. And I don't want any of you to live like that, right? But like I said, this whole channel, the purpose of this channel is designed to help you, the viewers, see more in the lines of the education behind your metabolism and understand how it really does work. But obviously, the higher level concepts of understanding what to change, when to change, comes to you individually. How does your body work? And so that's what we provide for all our clients: the GPS, how to get a next level physique, and how to understand it and keep it for life. So if you like these type of videos, like, comment, subscribe. But I'll see you guys next time.